Did Martin Harris actually see the gold plates, or did he just hallucinate them? When John Gilbert was typesetting the text for the Book of Mormon for printing, he asked Martin Harris, "Martin, did you see those gold plates with your naked eyes?" And Martin responded, "No, I saw them with a spiritual eye." As context, Martin Harris was Joseph Smith's original scribe for translating the Book of Mormon and one of the 3 witnesses to whom the angel came and showed the gold plates. Since then, lots of critics of the church use this statement about the spiritual eye and similar accounts to claim that Martin must not have really seen the plates, and so the gold plates can't actually have been real, physical, tangible artifacts. When it comes to critics using this claim about the spiritual eyes, there's issues with both the sources and issues with our assumptions about what it means to have spiritual eyes. When it comes to the sources, most of these accounts were only written down decades after Martin supposedly said this. None of the accounts were written firsthand by Martin himself, and all of these accounts come from skeptics trying to dismiss Martin's testimony. Not saying that these couldn't be true, but these are the kind of the caveats that as historians we've got to keep in mind. But even if these accounts are 100% accurate, if we really want to understand if Martin really saw the plates or not, we do need to understand what spiritual sight would have meant in 1800s America and to the saints during the Restoration. So to understand 19th century Christians, we got to back up a little bit. In the centuries after the New Testament, Christians and Jews generally came to a belief in an immaterial God, or a God who's beyond physical manifestation and therefore beyond physical sight. Thus, all spiritual and holy things could not be seen with your physical or natural eyes at all. And this belief continued through the 1800s. At this point in history, most people believed that no visions or holy experiences should be seen by any of the physical senses. Visions by spiritual sight were always considered superior to visions of physical or natural sight. In fact, in Martin Harris's day, anyone who ever admitted to having physically experienced divine things was sometimes called deranged, delusional, or even a monomaniac. So this is the tricky situation that Martin Harris finds himself in when people asked him whether he saw the plates with his spiritual or his natural eyes. If he said he saw the plates with his physical or natural eyes, then he could be called deranged, delusional, or monomaniac because he'd be saying that he saw spiritual things, which were supposedly unseeable, with natural eyes. But if he said that he saw the plates with his spiritual eyes, then his witness could just be written off as a subjective, internal experience rather than an actual witness of physical evidence. And of course, this is exactly what his critics did. On top of this, there are even accounts of people who knew Martin saying that he was sane on most things, but in spiritual things, he was deranged and a monomaniac, which, based on what we know, maybe means he did say he physically saw the plates, and they called him those things to dismiss his account because that simply wasn't acceptable. But then you also have to consider what spiritual sight meant in the context of the Restoration and the Book of Mormon, which seems to have influenced what Martin meant, even if it didn't line up completely with what the contemporaries in the 1800s would have meant by it. According to these new scriptures that Joseph Smith was translating from the gold plates, especially the Book of Ether, spiritual sight no longer had to be completely separate from all physical experiences whatsoever. Instead, true spiritual sight was when a person, through faith, could obtain a real view of divine beings or real sacred objects that were physical, embodied, and tangible, and you could physically interact with them, just like when the brother of Jared had so much faith that God showed him his physical finger through the veil. With the Restoration, saints now believed in spiritual sight in the sense that a person had to be divinely authorized and spiritually prepared for the view, but not in the sense that it excluded natural senses. Unfortunately, the critics of Martin's day who were asking him about his experiences with the plates seem to have been thinking more along the lines of their contemporaries in the 1800s rather than as the witnesses of the Restoration would have. And in our day, critics tend to think about Martin's statement about spiritual sight without understanding either of these two historical perspectives. So what does this all mean for Martin Harris's witness of the plates? Did he physically see them or spiritually see them? Well, only Martin Harris is actually going to know that for certain, but what we do know is that Martin's claim to have seen by spiritual eyes or the eye of faith does not necessarily mean that he didn't also really see plates physically too. And if anybody in the future tries to tell you otherwise, you should send them this video. Did Martin Harris actually see the gold plates on YouTube? This was a presentation at the Fair Conference by Neil Rapley, and it goes into way more detail. And even more, you should go to the Book of Mormon Central YouTube channel to watch the newest episode of A Marvelous Work, which is a documentary all about the different witnesses who saw the plates and their very real experiences.